Hello and welcome to another episode of the Young Film Academy podcast. Now, I know what you're thinking, where was the intro music? This is actually a little precursor, so we're about to jump into the episode, but it's just to say that this episode largely is about the screen acting strikes and the life of an actor navigating that world. Now, the exciting thing is the strikes have been called to an end. They've reached an agreement between the powers above, as you'll find out about, and the Screen Actors Guild. So that's great news, but we wanted to bring this knowledge to you anyway because we think it's going to be really useful and relevant to actors and also to filmmakers, any kind of aspiring actor and filmmaker. There's lots to get your teeth into and understand what it is that people have been fighting for. So enjoy the episode.
Welcome to the Young Film Academy podcast, the essential podcast for teenagers looking to make their way in the creative industries. I'm Amelia Sciandra, and I'm here with our other host, Dan Allen.
Hello. Nice to see you.
Hello. Great to see you. How are you doing today?
Yeah, good. I think the world is rainy and crying, but we are cozy and warm. So we hope that we can bring audible warmth to our listeners, which is great. Yes, audible warmth. I like that idea.
Ooh, it's a great. And it was funny when you started your sentence with "the world is." I was like, oh, I wonder what he's going to say, and what I thought you were going to say as a little taster into our guest was I thought you were going to say something along the lines of the world is in flux in terms of the industry.
Nice. Yeah.
Because we've just ended the writer's strike in the U.S. has just ended not too long ago, and we're in the big ups for that, and we're in the final days, it seems, of the actors' strike that has also been taking place in the U.S. the SAG-AFTRA strike. Which, all of which has even though that's happening across the pond back in my home country, that all does have an impact even on stuff going on here.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got an amazing guest. We've got Doug, who's a friend of yours, who is a working actor on both stage and film, who's going to talk to us a bit about his journey and his experience, and also the trials and tribulations and the further reaching impacts of the strikes, which you might be listening thinking, well, how does that affect me? Like I'm really young. I haven't I'm not a member of SAG yet, but it has a massive impact. Understanding what they're fighting for, why it's important, so that you don't fall into personal sort of traps when you do enter the industry. So
100%. That is that really useful tips. And in general, I think Doug's going to have some great tips for making it. He's very much somebody who's pulled himself up off his bootstraps. We went to undergrad together, and then, he went right on his way to being a very successful and very talented actor. So without further ado, let's welcome Doug Harris. Thanks so much for being here, Doug.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, good to be here. Excited to be here.
Did you feel like you needed to say brilliant because this was a British podcast and you knew that the listeners might be British?
Well, yeah, because it was more of a recall of you saying it, because I've known you since before you lived across the ocean. And so hearing you say brilliant feels like a hug to my soul somehow.
Yeah, I would never have said brilliant when we knew each other way back when, because that is
no, you would have been like red. That was all you said. That's all you said. Nothing else.
Yeah, bro. So cool.
As is it brilliant? Is that quite a British?
It's super
very
British.
Interesting.
I don't want to be the one to break that to you, but it's,
No, I had no idea.
yeah, it's quite British.
I just assumed all the sort of positive adjectives were sort of shared in some ways.
No, we're very negative here in the States. They're very. We say nah. Yeah.
Well, so you're podcasting you're recording in from New York, where you are an actor. Tell us a bit about what you do. What's been going on for you in the last little bit?
So I've been lucky. I've been busy, but I started primarily as a theater actor. Been acting professionally for, I guess, like a decade now. But theater acting is what brought me to New York. It's why I came here. I work a lot in new play development, or at least that's what I started in. Some classical work, things like that. And then over time, fell into sort of an indie film scene that's been, and now over the last couple of years, as I've made a more conscious effort to do on-camera work, it's grown a little bit for me. And, you know, I'm also a writer. I'm a playwright, and I'm having my first screenplay. We're actually going into production on my first feature screenplay in about, what's today? In about 6 days. Oh my God, I'm going to burst in a flame. So that's happening soon. And then, so a little bit of everything is kind of what I do. And so that all of those things also have required me to be a producer, a director, all these things in very mild ways that I'm mostly stressed about and not very good at.
So can you talk a little bit about what it means to work in new play development as an actor? Can you tell us a little bit about, like, have you been working in R&Ds, things like that?
Yeah, so for me, what it meant initially was you would come across scripts that had yet to be produced, that were still in their writing stages. Usually it would be like a first, second draft even. Getting into a room with other young artists. It was kind of a nice way to get involved in just performance in general when I first got here, because, you know, there was nobody knocking on my door at the start, you know. So we'd get in rooms and we would sit and work on plays. It's a lot of taking scenes and basically redrafting them in real time. Sometimes it's about adding my own spin on it from things I think are either funny or compelling, depending on what they're looking for. So it's really about helping the writer at that stage. And then over time, you move with a play. A lot of plays don't make it, you know. That's the writers do, so it's fine if your play doesn't make it. But the plays that do make it, they go into a state of sort of production or more serious workshops with more financing, things like that. And we sort of bring them to life in a more physical way, which is very exciting. And then, you know, you move to a state where people trust you with scripts that are already existing, or you get brought into those processes later and later is what I've found as I go further along. But new play development is just the process of acting, because it's what you're expected to do with a script in its later stages anyways, which is just to be original, have your own opinions, like bring yourself to the text, all of those things. It's just new play development allows you to start in a more, or for me when I began, it was a safer space to start, because failing meant nothing, you know. So and it still doesn't, and now while some people might feel like it means a lot, it's still pretty safe. I've just learned how safe it is over time. Yeah.
That's brilliant. That's really fun. And now you said you're kind of moving out of that, being at the nascent stage of those kind of developments, and you're moving into it in kind of a later stage. So what does that look like now in terms of what you do if you still work with new plays? I mean, I know you're doing a lot of kind of other stuff now too, but do you still fit that in?
Yeah, no, definitely. It's been, I had a premiere show this year by a brilliant writer named Chisa Hutchison, who I think is maybe one of my favorite American writers. And we premiered it this summer it's called the Contemporary American Theater Festival. It's a great, they premiere 5 to 6 new shows every year from really good writers, and they often have a life afterwards. And so that was a two-hander that had been done as an audio play during COVID and had never been staged. And so we got in there and really cut it up. But the script itself for that's an example of a script that was so well written and in such a good place that it was really more about how we interpreted the script rather than like building the words, changing the scenes. Because it's sort of like, has like a little bit of a thriller component and a twist towards the end. And it's a two-hander. So like it's back and forth. So there wasn't a lot of shift to happen, but now it's a lot more of just taking scripts like that and making sure that they have the kind of vibrancy that the writer's looking for. So like for that play specifically, it was like a sense of danger from my character, like threatening quality. And so that was great. And now, then we sit and wait and, it gets shopped around. And if we get to go to another theater, we're very excited to do that. So I still do that quite a bit. I just am a little more selective about them over time, just because I'll do anything for free, I still don't have any shame, but but like when I've realized now also how much time it takes to do something like that, it's pretty heavy lift.
Do you get told, like when you work on a project like this, when there is some workshopping to be done, do you get told sort of how far along the script is, or can you sort of tell? I'm wondering whether there's certain new plays or certain new projects where you're sort of encouraged, you're told like this is very early stages, so the more ideas and the more input you have about your character, the better, versus whether there's situations where you're in a room and you're told no, this is pretty much the final script, we're not looking for ideas, sort of thing.
It depends on you have to sort of feel that out yourself. Like I think that's part of like the professional experience is, because you'll run into this in film, theater, anything, when they're like, oh yeah, I would love feedback, and then you throw something and you're like, oh, you actually didn't want any feedback. That's important. I shouldn't have said anything. So sometimes I think it's a little bit of a trust fall between you and when you're in a rehearsal space, it's really the writer, but the director is there to, especially in theater, is there to mitigate that. Because the thing that I think is different between theater and film in this respect is that you're all in the same room. So it's like if somebody is not good at getting notes, which like there are great people who are super talented, actors, writers, directors, who are not good at getting notes, And so like a professional skill set that I think I've been lucky to develop by way of making this mistake is that I can sense out pretty quickly if somebody wants that or not. But I had not a professor. I did an apprenticeship after college, and the person who ran the apprenticeship said, you start off with one card to play in every rehearsal process. And he's like, because we were all new young actors, he was like, so you play your one card, and if you play it well, you get a second card. And that's like the way of like building your professional relationship with that individual. And you have a process relationship, and then you have an individual relationship, and you need to look at them differently. Because like I also have learned when the producers are in the room, I'm not going to be there giving the director and the writer notes. Like their bosses are there, sort of, which is just an eye towards the ecosystem of the making of a thing, which is same for everybody, no matter the medium. But you can tell usually pretty quickly. I find that the best writers and directors are really seated in their work. They're confident and they're capable. And like, that's also something you can feel pretty quickly, The play this summer, the writer is amazing. And she was, honestly, I think the more professional people are, the more they are open to that feedback because they can sit confidently in that work. And she was like, yeah, what do you think? And like, no matter how I came at it, I couldn't have improved that text, It's like if the joke is good, if the bit is good, then, there's nothing to be said,
Leave it, yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's so good. I love the imagery of like almost like, having the card to play. And I think it's really important for our sort of younger audience, when you get into that professional landscape, there might be like this panic of, oh my God, I made a suggestion and it didn't go well. Therefore, I must keep coming up with suggestions and hopefully one of them goes well. And it's like, no. If the first one went badly, like the last thing you want is just sort of like a torrential downpour of just ideas from, like, you appreciate the enthusiasm, but very quickly it becomes tricky and it's sort of not trying to dig yourself holes, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I think like for the thing it's hard to convince younger actors of is that like your career is long. I know that it doesn't feel like it when you've been desperate to book a show and you're like, this is the show. I've got to prove everything. I got to get it all out now. It's like, okay, it's really hard to have that perspective, but if you give a thought that doesn't go over well the first week, there will be a second week. So like, just, you don't have to have a new thought right away. Like, it's okay.
Yeah.
Everybody gets it wrong. You'll see people. I'm notorious for pitching, whenever I do a comedy, pitching bits that are bad, but I do it vindictively at some point. I'm like, I'm going to pitch a worse bit. But like that, the point is that like everybody gets it wrong. So
yeah.
It's not just because you're young or you haven't done it before. But you know, that some things you got to learn by falling off the bike. So.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and what you're talking about here, which I think is really important, and we talk a lot about on the podcast, is like the development of skills beyond the technical skills that you need to do the thing that you've been hired to do, that actually, in a lot of senses, the interpersonal skills, the personal and communication, and that kind of being able to read the room skill can almost be sometimes more important than your actual level of talent and technical skill doing the thing. And so what you're talking about there is a meeting thereof when you work on new things. I think that you kind of get that. That's like a crucible for those skills more than maybe a typical project that's already been developed and they just want to do a production of it, or they just want to shoot the thing. But I think it's a really important, you know, we talk about this on all our courses, that while we're teaching you how to be filmmakers, how to be actors, what we're also really teaching you is how to work with people, because that's all it ever is in every iteration over and over again.
Yeah. I mean, it's the most valuable component of, I mean, I've had a lot of different jobs over time, you know, because being an artist is something that takes a while to build up the steam to self-sustain. But I think in every career I've ever had, that is a superpower. And so if you can galvanize that, if you can really listen to what's happening around you and like be self-reflective in a way, that feels like a bad thing for a lot of artists, because like I know it's a slippery slope down into the hole of like self-doubt. But when you land in that space of like self-confidence but self-awareness, that's when I think most people, especially in terms of performance or any, like, I guess directing, anything that happens in a room with other people watching you receive feedback or take risk, like that's when you start to actually make the product or create the thing that you want to start creating. That's what I think, like before that is when you're green, and after that is when you're actually working and doing things. Seasoned. Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about, you know, we were interested in having you on the pod for various reasons, but one of the things that we were hoping you could tell us a little bit about as an actor in this very current moment is how the strikes, both the writer's strike, which is now thankfully over, and the SAG-AFTRA strike, which is not over, how those have been impacting you and what you've seen. Kind of, have you been on the picket? I think I saw pictures of you protesting.
I've not been out on the picket line.
No, you haven't been out on the picket line.
I've been.
I guess they're more in LA than in New York, aren't they?
No, they are. There's one actually down the road from my house. But I've been supporting in other ways, doing some other stuff. But the strike has been. First of all, it's incredibly important. Some of the stuff that's being dealt with in the strike, in my personal opinion, will have very far-reaching effects on the way that we look at this idea of owning our own self-image over the next forever. You know, they're laying the groundwork for how, I mean, companies own our self-scanned image and can utilize it in a lot of ways when we sign these contracts that none of us read. And SAG-AFTRA is out there sort of like defending the front lines of how that's going to work in terms of AI and things like that. And also, equitable wage is no joke. You know, when I look at the way that inflation has impacted other industries and it has not had an impact on screen actors, it's insane. And acting's a funny business because, you know, it's the same thing. You know, I do the same thing as, you know, Brad Pitt. And like, that's not, we have not a lot going on in common, you know, like, because you were both actors and it's very, very different experience. And there are people that their career is background acting, and that's like and that's what they want to do. And, you know, all of these things are sort of lumped in together, which speaks largely to how we treat artists overall. But they generate livelihoods, and art is an ecosystem where people who do this one thing impact people who do other things. We come together on sets, and while this strike is happening, a lot of people are out of work. I just started filming under a SAG interim contract like the beginning of this month. So I've been on set for 2 weeks. We still have like 2 more weeks to film. It's a movie, but I've been around with like a lot of crew and folks that are out there, like they're trying to negotiate the same things that as a stage actor I was negotiating during COVID. My union was still asking for my dues, and I was like, oh, what do you mean? I had work going, but I was like, we're not active. Like there is an impossible thing happening. So right now, the way that it's impacted us overall is that there is a funnel of projects, and they start in the same way that the theater projects I was discussing sort of happen, which is that these writers have these concepts. There are larger studio institutions, but at its base, these writers have these projects. They take them along, they get produced, they get a director attached, then they go into a space where they're going to get made, and then they have actors attached. When the writers stopped, they had to all walk away from their contracts. So that was like if you remember the union, you're stepping away from your contract, which, is a huge risk for some of them, because you sign a contract, you're like, I'm paying for my house, I'm paying for my food. And that there's no guarantee that some of those contracts were there when they returned. I'm sure a lot of them were, but that's still a risk,
Yeah.
And so they new people as well, I imagine.
Oh yeah. And then if you think about people coming out of school every year, young people, they walked into a place where I think over time it will be good to see that community. But, when you're looking to just get in right away, it's a scary prospect. There's no jobs available. So the writers stopped and the actors were still working, right? So for a little while, and they were making some television shows and things, and the writers were just not on set. But that drops the quality of the show dramatically. If you look back, there was a previous writer's strike in like 2000, and you can see examples of like terrible turns, plot twists on television shows that occurred because they had like people who were writing that were not union members, and it's like, why did they kill that character for no reason? And that's sort of the thing that happened. And then when they struck together, which was great for collective negotiations. Now we're at a point where the writers are back, they're getting their projects up, but it's still creating a backlog because they can't move forward with production without union actors. And the union is where, I'm not going to say that all the best actors are in this screen union, but they are. Like for film and television, they are, Do you
know what the main sort of talking points are, or like the main demands of SAG? And like obviously you mentioned image rights and body scan image rights, which is obviously a fairly new thing, right? The idea of sort of a digital clone of you that can then pop up. I think I saw an article of someone spotted themselves in a video game where I think they're just being like used as a background character even, just because that company technically owned the image and could do whatever they wanted. But do you know what the other sort of main points are that would like to be changed? I know there's a threat of AI, or is sort of being talked about a little bit, but I know that also really heavily affects the writers' side of the strikes more than maybe the actors' side.
Yeah, I think the AI component for writers is a huge deal, just because you feed somebody's previously written scripts into a algorithm and then say kick out a Quentin Tarantino-esque script. It's going to do that. And there's not really a defense against that. And I think for the writers, and also this translates to the actors, is that you're going to lose a component of humanity that is the key piece of why we make this in the first place. It's not just a product to be consumed. It's art. The goal underneath of it is like to communicate a message of humanity, right? Yeah. And if we lose that, then it's just like it's the whole other thing. But for the screen actors, I know that a huge component right now, the hot button thing like this week is ownership of your image and likeness in perpetuity by the studios if you make above a certain amount of money. And one of those things that is like in the news at the moment is after a performer passes away, they could potentially own your image and likeness and reutilize it without checking with an estate or, really verifying that with anybody. Now that we can, it used to be like you would be around in film, but, you can watch your old films or whatever. And now we can take those films and we can make those characters speak and dance and do things. And that's terrifying. Like to live forever and have no say on what that looks like is really dark. And the studios are doing it. The negotiations are closed. Like we don't get to see really the insides and outsides of them. But for these studios, they're just doing it as a, we just want to own what we can and we want to have property control over that. But like, I think a lot of the actors are seeing as the people upon whom it would happen to, are seeing the real impact of that. And it's, and right now the question is how much they're going to pay, even for now they're like, fine, we'll pay to scan your body, but like, then we're not going to pay in the future. And that goes back to the whole issue, which is residuals over time.
Right.
We really don't want to see acting as a one-day effort and then get zero return on the investment and all that return go to. It's just about distribution of returns on a product. And,
and part of that is about streaming, right? That when all the streaming started, none of this had been negotiated because it was all so new and it all happened quite quickly. And then, it's always a big joke. I mean, I've got a friend. She did like one episode of a television show when she was like 17, and still to this day she'll get a check in the mail and it's like, it's funny because it's like 2 cents, right? So it's like, it's not a lot of money, but she's still getting a residual check from that, as she should, because that show is still showing on streaming platforms. People are still watching it. Mm-hmm. And so it is also about that, right? That they haven't really agreed anything for actors in terms of things being on streaming and therefore being able to be watched forever. And then people being able to get a return on that because it's still their work out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I was I was reading for some auditions in like, so I was like the reader for the performers, and it was probably like 2016, and the casting director was like, "You would be shocked at the people we can get." It was for a streaming platform. Like, you'd be shocked at the people that are coming in here to read, because early on, actors were saying, the exposure was so high, if you were on Orange is the New Black, you were getting seen by everybody. And that's great. We've been taught that's great for our business because, we want to be a known product. But those people were getting paid pennies on the dollar.
Nothing. Yeah.
And that ultimately meant, there were actors working on shows that were on major streaming platforms that were working in coffee shops. Like, they were series regulars and they would just go back, which can sound like a bougie problem, but the reality is that when you see how much work that actually is to uproot your entire life for a period of 6-7 months, and then on this end of the day, the 7th month, you need to go out and find a coffee shop job immediately. Like, you can't take a week off to sit. It's hard because those people are up at 5 a.m. and then they get done at like 8 p.m. and then they have to go. For them, they were shooting in New York for Orange is the New Black, so they had to commute home.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's insane, and also not a way anybody can sustainably live. And a lot of these streaming platforms are like, we'll kick the can down the road, we'll give you exposure, and to most actors' discredit, a lot of us were willing to sign up, and I think that and I'm not exempt from that. I would have totally taken it, but now I think that the bill is here, and like SAG is now. We've all tried it, and it was not sustainable. And inflation in the States specifically, inflation's been crazy, and people can't afford to pay for groceries. And if you're working a day on set, you're not making enough money over time and there's no future return on it. It's like these people are making a lot of money, and what actors are asking for is a portion of that for their work.
Yeah. It's so sad, I think, in a way, in terms of I feel like it's almost an inevitability, perhaps. I think you've got an industry, and this goes for crew as well as for actors, it's a very saturated industry in terms of there's lots of people that want to work in it, and whenever you get a situation like that, then it's a race to the bottom of who's going to do it the cheapest. And that's where you need organisations like SAG. Sadly, there's not really much of an equivalent in the UK. I think you've got Equity, which is like, just please pay us minimum wage, and then that's like it, which is like, I don't know, £9. And you need your pillars, you need your unions that are going to fight against that internal desire to just get a foot on the ladder, to just make that first step and undercut everyone else, which is then only going to create like a negative feedback loop and make it completely unsustainable for everyone involved in the industry, unless you're suddenly worth loads in marketing assets, right? That's when you suddenly get paid the big bucks, whether you're a director, writer, or an actor.
I think it's a tricky thing, because there's this idea that actors have invested in, it's like a pursuit of a dream and things, and it's true for all the components of the industry, but it kind of kills the reality of it, which is that it's a working class job.
It's a job.
Like specifically on sets, like you look and you see crew members. I feel like the narratives we hear are the struggling artist and the incredibly successful artist. And there are lots of people that have lived in between those two spaces over the course of the history of film and television. And that's who needs to be honored by these group negotiations. Like, it's the same thing as, I don't really care how a billionaire's, I want them to be taxed heavily, but like, I don't care how they feel about their taxes. That's not me being a bad human. It's just that, like, I know I have a limited amount of concern available, and I will focus it on the middle group. And we need to support the young and upcoming actors and not tell them that, well, you'd be George Clooney one day. It's like, no, like, if you like this thing that we're doing, you can do it in a lot of sustainable ways. And a lot of my favorite actors, they did that for a long time before anybody knew who they were.
Yeah, we used to call them journeyman actors. I don't think we use that term so much anymore, right? But like, these people, and there are you're so right. And like, I think probably using that term, like, that's probably how we describe you now, Doug, right? Like, you work as an actor. That is your job. You don't have another job. You work regularly, but right now, no, you don't have a million TikTok followers or whatever, right? Like, you're not quote unquote famous. And I think it's that is the difficult distinction. And we see this obviously with directors as well, with writers too, that like, when we think about the thousands of movies that come out each year, people are like, well, the new Scorsese film came out this year, but it's like, well, what about all the other films that are directed by people you've not heard of? You're still going to see those films in the cinema. And so it is this notion of, we tend to think of it, like you said, on two sides of the spectrum, either the people who are, just like really trying and can't get anything going, or the people who you see on the cover of magazines. And most people fall into the middle category. Most of the people making the TV shows and films that you watch are in that middle category. They're regular working class people who are trying to do their job. And it's why I think the strikes are so important, especially from the perspective of people in this country watching it happen, because we don't have strong unions in the UK. And actors in the UK could never go on strike because there's no way that would do anything. And so I think it's been a really interesting thing to watch, but I wonder if you've got any perspective. What I've been hearing a lot about is, because of these strikes, there's a lot of productions that are now moving over here to the UK. And they're building a huge new studio. They're building 2 new studios in London. I think HBO is building a new studio here. So there's lots of stuff that's like kind of coming here. And one of the reasons, unfortunately, seems like it's that because there's no unions here, because they can pay people less and take a little bit more advantage of people. But have you heard anything about kind of how studios and people are responding to that from the perspective of kind of going quote unquote elsewhere?
This was always sort of a thing, is that like, because even in the States, there are like right to work states where they'll go and they'll film projects and they can get non-union crew members and things like that. And it's studios are going to try to find, I can't speak to them. Maybe there might be an altruistic component at the center of them, but they are businesses.
Yeah.
And so they are going to do what they can to maximize their return. That's their job. And I think that the only mistake you could make is to think that that's not their job. There are humans operating them. I think there are people that don't want the worst, but I think collective bargaining is an incredibly powerful tool. And ultimately, I do think that there is something about SAG that is unavoidable for film production. There's a tier of you can do projects without union actors, and that can result in a certain amount of things. Maybe they'll slowly build the option to not do that. But SAG is sort of has its tentacles in every, and if SAG says you can't work, then you're not working. You can work on those CD list films that are out there, which, not to say that those aren't valuable and interesting, and I watch them, but I think studios can try what they want, but it's just, this is a good union to have this strike, because it's gonna prevent them from, you can't run away from it. If it was like certain crew unions, sure, you can move to a different state, or sure, you can move to a different country, but ultimately the artists coming together make the art better. Learning from each other, being in those communities, learning how to light a set, learning how to do sound properly, learning how to have all of these extra things. You can't pay for that experience. You can't get around it. It really does elevate the level of the filmmaking and the television production to a place that, to me, that makes, if they are doing these things in those ways, it means that they think the people watching their shows are dumb and have no taste. And I just don't agree.
Yeah.
But also, I'm supportive of, I would love for businesses people to have more work in all those places that they're making those studios. That's great. We'll just, over time, if you don't pay workers, we've seen that throughout history, what that looks like. And people can play the game, but there's a lot of evidence as to how it's going to turn out. So I just don't think people need to suffer from that same situation over and over again for us to get to a better place. But
completely.
Who's the battle sort of between? Is it the Producers Guild? Is that who's on the other end of the chat, or is it with the major studios like Disney, Universal, and stuff
This is outside my wheelhouse, I would say. But the common theory is that it's between the major services. There are certain production companies like A24 is one. They make great small. Well, not small is not that they're small, but independent-ish films. Yeah. And they had generated a willingness to work with the union in order to give those things. So the project I'm working on right now, it's operating under a SAG interim agreement, which is an agreement that operates by the requests of what SAG has put forward. So we're allowed to shoot. And then our project, the one I'm going to be shooting, is also under an interim agreement. So we're in compliance with those things. So that the smaller studios, smaller groups, production companies, a lot of them are supportive of this. They're able to shift their model more quickly, but and I get that for them, the studios may be the leading force for them to personally grow. But it's unclear to me at this point if it's just a few individuals who are in charge of it, or these businesses actually want this model. There's a lot of question around that. But
I think the smoke and mirrors that they're using is that there's something called the AMPTP, and maybe you've seen this acronym going around. That's the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, and that's the face of the other side. But as Doug rightly said, we don't really know who's actually pulling the strings with that, because I know that lots of independent producing companies who are making smaller indie films are very happy to comply with these new SAG rules, and it's how stuff Doug's pictures are getting made. And so it's you do begin to wonder who are the holdouts, and are they the big ones? And and it is, as you say, maybe because they can't shift their business model fast enough, maybe because they are more focused on profit rather than anything else. But obviously something will have to give, because I've been thinking about this. We've got we had this funnel when there was the writer's strike, and then we had this kind of second funnel now that there's the actor strike. And so are you imagining, what do you imagine? Because I have this vision of like this huge buildup. And so when the writer's strike comes to an end, is there going to be an explosion of things going on? Or do you think / hope the changes with the actor's strike mean that actually maybe things won't go ahead because they have to reformat how they're going to move ahead in the right ways to meet the demands of the unions?
I think, this is where it becomes like a communal thing, which is that they're going to do these changes. At this point, we got the last and best offer, as it was stated, from the studio collective organization 2 or 3 days ago, and then they gave us another offer. So it's like, at this point, it's like, okay, personally for me, that was a huge indication that, things will bend over time. And it was actually quite bolstering for the union. But I think that, I think there will be a huge influx of work, because what's going to motivate people. And this is what I'm hopeful for. It's about expectation setting for all of us, because, that can mean a lot of different things. But for the collective, not having worked for a long time is a great motivator. And so I think that the typical process where people might take a week to, or like individuals not calling out casting, but say casting, well, we have 2 weeks. It's suddenly like, no, we want to take on 6 jobs. So like, let's get this done in 3 or 4 days. And that'll pick up speed. Production for a lot of these projects are ready. Like, they are waiting, and they've had time on the production side to like fill out their filings for state permits, fill out, like, all of those things are finished. And a lot of them, I'm sure, are already cast. You know what I'm saying? Like there are background conversations. There's no formal, but they will move quickly. And my hope is that will come so that people who are not members of SAG or members of the Writers Union can re-access their income, because there's been a lot of individuals that have taken a knee so that SAG actors can make this argument. It'll hopefully be beneficial to them in the long term, but different production unions have not been working, and they're also there's no intent for them to see an improved benefit after this. It's just better for the community. And so I hope that this flood gates open, and that those people get lots of work very quickly, and that actors in general keep that in perspective, because this is for us long term. So we may not all book series regulars inside of 2 months after this, but we're providing for when people come into the industry later. It's been a real hurt for actors in general since COVID, because they came in and then there was no stage work. So it's like, okay, we'll try to pivot from, and there's no film television work. So I do fear like an attrition of people who genuinely love acting from the ages of like in post-grad or even post-secondary school, whatever. Like I just want them to have not run away from it forever. But, which is the opposite of how I usually feel. I'm like, there's too many people that wanted to do that, but I want artists to make art. So, and they will, but hopefully a flood will open and we will all be very busy. That's the goal.
Yeah. I keep wondering, I think Dan and I talked about this once, of just like, I wondered if there would be a post-COVID renaissance. I thought maybe we're going to see this kind of explosion of art. And I think that the truth is we're not post-COVID, so that's why that hasn't happened yet. But I do have a feeling that, like you said, it was a bit of a 1-2 punch for this industry to go through COVID and then to have the strikes. So I do hope that there is this sense of like collective gratitude of like how much everybody has sacrificed to get us to this next moment, and therefore we can begin to make more exciting, better art. I don't know. All we keep doing is making sequels and prequels and rehashing the same stories. So that's what I hope from the Writers Guild, is that they start to get to, make original stories. As a writer, I mean, how are you feeling in terms of, making something that is truly unique and not a prequel or a sequel?
Well, for me, it's been a wild process. I think it feels great. That's what I would say in the short answer, is like, it feels like an exceptional opportunity to to be something, an outlier. I think like that section of the industry has been hurt, by this whole, the structure of the way the business works now. It doesn't support, what we now define as low budget films. And there are certain things out there, like, there are certain like spaces for like independent horror films and like independent like genre markets, but the in-between weird stuff that's not pure art house is like that's where we're going to find our voice for the next 20 years. And so I think that it's been fun for me to work on this project with some really good collaborators and to just see it become a reality, because I've never had something I've co-written for film be produced. I've never seen that before, and so I don't really know what it will be. And so that, I think, is emblematic of the artistic experience, is that like you really jump and then the parachute, it doesn't manifest. Like you build it, you build the parachute in the air, but it doesn't always work. But so we'll see. But it's been good, and it's made me a better artist to do it, to write something that's intrinsically me, because that's ultimately what you are as an artist, is your view, like your that's what you provide. And I know starting out I was like, that can't be enough, that there's no way. I need to like, what's the other thing? And like, really, that's the thing that I hope that artificial intelligence can never create, which is that like a distinct vantage point based off of so many things. I mean, we are our own algorithm in a way that is our life experiences, and that's not replicable, or it shouldn't be.
Right.
Yeah. We hope. I'm nervous about it. You know what? Like 9 months ago, I'd have said, well, we're fine. It's the creative arts and stuff. And then obviously ChatGPT happened, and then next thing you know, obviously the image creation's happening, and then next thing you know, the videos are out, and the videos look rubbish, but they exist, and they'll get better.
Yeah. And I think about everybody as like there are people out there who are making that are creating something beautiful. Their back end programming or whatever. It's really, I'm sure to them, it is an artistic process. And so I try to honor that in my thought process. But I think the way we choose to move forward with artificial intelligence is going to be a massive question for us, because where nobody wants to do any work, which I'm not exempt from. Like, I don't want to do that either. Like, I don't want to pay people to do things. I don't want to do things. I would rather not do the hard things. But we have to come together and decide that like those are what make us interesting in the end, is like doing the hard things. And so, and like it stinks. And I know like young people who would listen to this podcast would be like, it's that same experience you have when you're younger. It's like, do I really have to do that to get where I want to go? And the answer is yes, but it's worth it. And so I do also fear the easier option. I think, which makes me feel like crotchety old man in some ways, but like, it's been my experience that the things I've worked for have been better than the things that have just sort of happened to me over time. So I don't know that that's worth much, but that's how I feel.
Yeah, I think the thing I'm nervous about, I think, is ultimately when there's two films on at the cinema, one is AI generated and one is not. Whatever one people pay to go and see is what the studio will then spit out more of, right? And my hope is that there's almost like I can almost see it, like the Palme d'Or going to an AI generated movie, but then I hope it's a 3D gimmick, like when 3D was really popular in cinemas for a while, and then we're like, okay, yeah, no, this is actually quite dry or something, or just a little bit too predictable, or maybe it's not, maybe it's completely unpredictable, and we've just been doing content wrong the whole time.
No, I mean, I hear you.
People are going to sell their ticket buying, I guess.
I would argue that I think that will happen at some point, right? Like that very thing, which will happen. But I also think that art is inherently revolutionary. That, not to sound like a total goof, but I think that when that happens, people will respond. you know?
Oh, yeah.
And I think like part of me can look at that, and this is just me playing opposite of you, right? But like I do think that I think that like when that happens, I'd be really excited to see the art that comes out of it, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, that's how we feel when something bad happens in the world, you know? It's like, I'm like, it's terrible, it's awful, but like, what are people going to make? Like, how are we going to respond? And if it can be seen in that way, then I just think like we can get distracted by the studios, we can get distracted by the money, we can get distracted by all those things. But from what I've heard and seen, not that I've ever made a massive amount of money as a performer or anything like that, but at the mountaintop there, it's not much better. So like if we can get around that fascination with these shiny objects and be like, okay, cool, you guys can have your ticket sales to 8-year-olds, that's fine, but like what we're saying is like that's an interesting side project, but like the goal is to tell the best story possible that means the most to the world at this time and capture our moment. Like I don't think if there's a time when that happens, then they can pull it off. Then like they take something from us that we probably can't go back from. But I think we'll find a way around it.
Yeah, I think you'll always be able to until years and years from now, hopefully, when they've really been able to replicate a human. I think we'll always be able to know that there's something missing with AI. We were just talking about audiobooks, Dan and I, and there's already audiobook narrators that are AI voices, and you can listen to it for about 3 minutes, and then about 3 minutes in, something strikes you that there is something very odd about the way the voice sounds, and they don't know how to read foreign words or acronyms or anything, so they make mistakes, you know, so they're not perfect, and I don't think they ever will be, because they don't have the emotional prosody in their voice that a person does. And I do think that even though I'm sure we will get to the point where there's an AI-made film in a cinema coming out the same weekend a human-made film is in the cinema, I do think that people will want, we desire humanity, right? That's why we all become artists, is that we have something in us that's human that we want to express to others and see if they feel the same way too. And I just hope, maybe I'm naive, but I just really hope and believe that is indomitable. You cannot beat that. You can't beat the human version of it. And also, why are we like teaching AI to do creative things? Like, can't we teach AI to like clean out the plastic from the ocean? Like, let's like get it to do things that humans can't do.
That is happening as well. I know there's the incorporation of it into medicine is really interesting and really exciting that they're doing.
Good.
Having computers that can detect stuff that doctors just literally wouldn't be able to, because they can see things in the data that just don't show up no matter how you present it, which is cool.
Do that. Stop writing scripts.
I think you also have to remember I come from the theater background, so like that's been a dying art for hundreds of years. So it's like
it's always been a dying art.
It's always been a dying art, and so like you know, what's the worst that's gonna, you know, like it's like you can't replicate being in a live space for a theatrical performance, you know, like it's and okay, maybe that's
holograms in my time. I don't know.
It's just not the, you know. I hear you, but like when,
it's not why
even
you
if
go
it's,
to the theater.
If you're in like a random city, you know, maybe you're doing your show in a random city in Ohio, which, you know, for non-American Geographic fans is one of the more boring places in the entire world. If you're doing it in a random city, it's in Ohio, you're going to be there and be like, it's still special. Like when you, even if it's 20 people, 5 people, 1 person in a room, like, and I think that I hold on to that feeling when I think about the future of film and TV, which is just to say that there's nothing like laughing about the same joke in the same way as somebody else. Like, I just don't think they'll get there. We have to believe there's something special about us, or we should all just take a knee now, you know?
Yeah. Completely.
It almost is like feeding into that narrative of how do you retain what you were saying earlier of like that self-confidence but also self-awareness, but now there's like this extra threat eating into your self-confidence that just literally has not ever been there, despite acting being a profession for, well, centuries, millennia. I don't really know. It's crazy. I just googled Ohio. It does look a little bit boring.
Yeah, it's actually, it's
I would
terrible.
say It's not terrible, but I think
it's the go-to state. It's the go-to state that people use for like no. But I've actually been
nothing's
there.
happening.
Cincinnati's quite nice. I don't know what to say about that.
I would say the UK version. I would say would be Milton Keynes.
Lots. Yeah. Okay. I'm with you. Yeah.
You got it. You're with me. Yeah.
Wow. Really.
Albeit built at a very similar time. Sort of quite monotonous, or
quite. That's you're really bridging gaps there, Amelia. I appreciate that. I'm really
doing the transatlantic thing here.
Cultural gaps are covered.
Well, I'm conscious of time, so let's hit you with the last two questions that we always ask our guests, which is the first one is, what were you doing as a teenager that impacts can be drawn a line from to now what you do?
Stressing. I think I was stressed all the time, but that's the first thing that comes to my mind. But
mate, that's a fresh answer. So thank you.
Yeah, we haven't had that one.
And I was trying really as hard as I could. But I think those have not all necessarily gone away, but I've definitely worked on them, and they've gotten a lot better. No, I think the dry answer is reading things that I thought nobody else was reading, like not intentionally. Like this is before Marvel and all this stuff, but I would still like steal away and read comic books. I would read like graphic novels. There was no community of internet people talking about like cool like things like that, and despite the fact that I felt really alone, I sort of pursued those interests on my private time. And then I grew up into a world where making stories, I meet people all the time that read those books, read those things, novels as well, and just like, oh, I wasn't alone, even if I felt like I was in my interests. The world is just so much bigger than I thought it was at that age. I grew up in like a conservative sort of environment, and we wore uniforms to school every day. We did all those things, and I was like, I shouldn't really talk about this with anybody. Nobody's gonna be interested, and I was probably right. But out there in the world, there were so many people, and so I felt the need to conform, which is totally whatever. And then over the course of my life, it's been a pleasant surprise to find myself back at the things I really enjoyed when I was a teenager. And be like, oh, these aren't, you can write these things off as dumb, young things, but they're not. They're like things that mean something to people, and my interest was valid. So not giving up my interests for the sake of others would be like the thing that I took from that experience, and has been powerful for me.
You were an athlete as well when you were in high school, weren't you?
Yeah, I played lacrosse for many years.
Very cool.
Good old lacrosse, and I played some football. I quit football to do theater, and the coach did not enjoy that fact.
American football, you should say.
American football.
He did not quit soccer to play football.
I didn't quit soccer. Yeah, I played a lot of sports. That was good. It's been definitely helpful to have an athletic background. As a performer, I was talking to somebody about this. Yes, I was doing a shot on set yesterday where I had to walk around the camera on a Steadicam, and they were like, "Wow, we did one rehearsal and I was able to do it." It's not that hard, but they were like, "Wow, that was great." I was like, "Oh, I have spatial awareness, social awareness and spatial awareness, which I think maybe some of the high school athletics help with is good." So, and theater too, yeah. So
totally, yeah.
I don't know, but stressing.
And if you could go back and give high school aged Doug some advice, what would you tell him, aside from make sure you meet Amelia, which you did? What would you go back and tell him?
Don't meet no. I would no.
Avoid Amelia at all costs.
If I could go back and give him some advice, I think it would just be that things are not to take things too seriously, and also that it's that advice I was talking about for young actors in a rehearsal process, is that your career and your hopes and aspirations, they are all long. Like, they take a long time, and there's something really beautiful about that coming to terms with that is like another hard thing that we do as people. It's like you don't want to take it for granted. You may not be here forever, but everything is part of something larger rather than like the most important thing. And I think that, it's easy to, when you're young, especially if you have like young actors listening to this, you can watch your shows and be like, oh man, I'm not doing it yet. Like, I'm not out there on television or in the movies or, and that's really not the thing. You're going to want a sense of immediacy with it. And I just promise you it'll be so much better if it's not that. That breaks more people than it makes. And knowing who you are and what you have to offer and taking time with yourself is not a skill set many people in their teens are endowed with. But it is something that if you can find, man, even if you just give yourself a breath, you will get so far so fast. Just give yourself a little more time.
Yeah, I love that.
Doug, thank you so much.
It's okay to be patient.
Yeah.
So wonderful hearing and learning from that.
Oh, this was great.
I love that imagery as well. I always say to people, it's so important to not put your happiness over there somewhere in the distance. There's that beautiful saying, the grass is greener where you water it, which I think is just so beautiful and so true. Because otherwise it will literally cause you so much pain and unhappiness in the present, because you keep telling yourself that you are unhappy because you haven't got this yet. The reality is, even if you have that, suddenly you have that and that's in the past, so it's still not going to help you with your present moment.
And if you get it, then you won't even be able to enjoy it. And it's like, because that's a muscle to not move your goalpost on yourself. Be motivated, be ambitious, work hard, show up on time. Those are all the standard rules. Show up on time, show up on time, show up on time. But the, consistency above everything else, and build yourself a slow runway. Like, you'll be great. And you'll make something new. Nobody else can do that. So you don't need to rush to like get the thing. Like, your thing is, you're building that.
Yeah, nobody else can be you. Yeah, 100%. That's brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Doug. This was really terrific to have you and see you again after many, many years.
Yeah. No, I really appreciate you all having me, and this was just a treat.
That was great. Amelia, I know as an actor yourself, this has, I was going to say it has far more effect on you than me, but I mean, all my sort of crew friends also sort of on pause at the moment as well. I know a lot of people waiting. There's an expectation that early next year things are going to sort of open back up. But
yes.
But I know, because there's not meant to be sort of pre-contractual agreements, nothing's even sort of, it's not even like they're getting everything ready to hit the green button. It's like, no, there's sort of no talking at all until the green light happens.
Yeah.
And then that stuff's largely going to happen, although I know Doug did indicate that there's sort of some loose agreements in place, but that's probably with your big...
Yeah, I'm sure there's behind closed doors stuff for the big talent, but I do think that for the journeyman actor, as we said, for the crew, for the working people who are not the big stars, I do think we've kind of felt this held breath of nothing's going on, what's going to happen. And I do think, I very much hope that we're going to all have a great exhale in 2024 and just sort of feel that now everything is back running again, and auditions are coming in and things like that. It's been an interesting thing to see what people have been up to whilst this has been going on. I've seen a lot of people get involved in theater who kind of weren't ever doing theater before. They're really big screen actor. They're people who make most of their career on screen, and then have said, well, there's no screen, so I better try to pivot a little bit. As well as people, encroaching in my territory, coming over to voice work, and I'm saying, well, stay out of voice work, give me the job. Yeah. No kidding, but it isn't one of those moments too where I think you see, which I always think is really important for our young listeners to understand, is that we're so rarely just one thing, So you have something that you want to pursue, obviously, but it's like jack of all trades, master of none. You really do want to be a jack of all trades. It is a good thing to be able to expand out of a box. And in this time, I think we've seen people breaking out of their boxes. Out of necessity, obviously, but I think it's proven to some people, I can do that. And also, like Doug was saying, the smaller producing houses have also been saying, no, we can operate under what SAG is looking for. We can do that. We can make those shifts that are so important. And so I think you're seeing, it's like the small companies are now leading the way for the big companies to follow. The working actors. Yeah, and the working actors are leading the way for the big stars to follow, hopefully. So, yeah, it'll be really interesting, I think, to see how it all plays out in the new year.
Yeah, it's so important as well. I have one project that I do actually get residuals on each year, and it's amazing. Like it really is like a nice boost. And if it happened on more projects, then it would be, I would consider it more of a reliable and sustainable like source of income, which is always was meant to be,
right?
But that's sort of been slowly taken away. And certainly the films that I have that have ended up on big streaming platforms, you see nothing because
you don't see a dime.
Blanket sold as like one sale, but because it's not DVD sales or home rentals, that's always where the negotiation was. But hopefully now, streaming being the biggest change in the climate of consumption of this kind of content, then we can get this over the line. And my hope as well is that some of this somehow filters down to people in other roles as well.
Yes.
And by that I mean like the roles that always did get residuals, that is restored in this new world.
Agreed.
There obviously was a big pie to share around, and it's seemingly gotten smaller despite record profits for the big companies. So so there's definitely something disjointed there going on that could be redressed. We have a question, Amelia. This is a question
great.
I feel like for you. This is from Thomas. He's actually 21 and he is wondering, he says he's finishing drama school this year. Should he travel or set up base in America or in London? Well, LA is what he says. But obviously, as we spoke to Doug, it's not just LA, it's also New York and stuff. And as someone who has traversed the pond, I wondered if you had some thoughts on the matter.
Yeah, well, I mean, firstly, congratulations, Thomas. That's so exciting to be finishing drama school. What a wonderful thing. You are on the precipice of an exciting moment in your life, which is fab. I would say stay here first. And the reason I say that is that it's not very easy to just go to LA and try to make it because of the rules on immigration and how much it costs and things like that. But I do think, there used to be, and we should have asked Doug about this, and maybe we'll ask another actor that we speak to at some point about this, but there used to be a kind of really popular thing that an actor would do, a young actor in the U.S., which is they'd go in around January, February to LA for what's called pilot season. And that's when they're trying to make a bunch of pilots for a bunch of new TV shows. And so you might go and get to make some pilots that never see the light of day, that the show doesn't get picked up. But it's a really great way to cut your teeth. It's a great way to meet people. It's a great way to network. And I've heard that pilot season, because of streaming, actually has kind of not died entirely, but it's kind of lessened. And I think that, but I think it still exists. And so I would say spend a couple of years here building yourself up, getting some experiences that you can get here before you try to make that big move. Because unless you've got something to fall back on financially, it can be really, really difficult. But I think that there's other options. You don't, LA isn't the only place. There's a lot of television happening in Atlanta, which is in Georgia in the U.S., and Chicago. Canada, they film a ton of stuff in Canada, which interestingly might be easier for a British person because of the relationship between Canada and Britain. But yeah, I think it's in the same way that we really are London-centric here. We're very LA and New York-centric in the U.S., and I think that there's a chance in both places, I think, to expand those perspectives, because there is work to be had elsewhere here in the UK besides London, and elsewhere in the U.S. besides LA and New York.
I always think it's like it's a bigger pond over there, but there's way more fish in the pond.
And way more fishermen.
Sharks, yes, and way more fishermen. Which just means that you're up against it. As you mentioned, there's already barriers to entry in terms of like cost of living there, which my understanding is way higher than here. Plus, you've got insurance on top of that, which is not to scaremonger going. Like, if you have the means to go, then yeah, go for pilot season if that returns in a fruitful way. But ultimately, yeah, there's different ways you want to thrive. But going there cold feet, I think you're gonna have a much harder time than building upon what you have here. Which is if you are indeed already UK based.
Right, for sure.
Awesome. Well, Amelia, this has been a treat as always.
As always, lovely. Thank you so much, Dan, and we'll see you next time.
It's been educational and informative, and we hope you have grown as actors and as people, and as union supporters. So
yes.